Ew, gotta get rid of this old Backstreet Boys t-shirt.
Tell me why.
Because it stinks, boys.
Tell me why.
I've washed it so many times, but the odor won't come out.
Tell me why.
No, you tell me why I can't get rid of this odor.
Have you tried Downy Rinse and Refresh? It doesn't just cover up odors, it helps remove them.
Wow, it worked, guys.
Yeah.
Downy Rinse and Refresh removes more odor in one wash than the leading value detergent in 3 washes. Find it wherever you buy laundry products.
Before we begin, I wanted to give a huge shout out to Amazon Music for partnering with me on this episode of Chasing Creativity. But more on this later. Let's get right into today's episode. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Chasing Creativity. I'm Kiran Manral, your host, and today my guest is a dear friend and ace photographer, Ronny Sequeira. Welcome to Chasing Creativity, Ronny.
Thank you so much for having me here.
So good to see you again after so many years, Ronny. And you've been doing wonderful stuff. I keep seeing your updates on LinkedIn and everywhere. And I've always been curious, Ronny. You grew up in Jamshedpur. And I don't think there was any photography in your childhood, so to speak, in the back, or any art, so to speak. So how did photography come to you? When did it all begin?
In fact, it's quite ironical that because of Jamshedpur is what I owe my photography to.
Okay.
Partly. But more so to my dad because... so my dad grew up in a photography studio very strangely in Nagpur. And whether we like it or not, he was forced to do a lot of things like printing and developing the film and stuff.
Okay.
But that got him interested. And towards when he was an adult, he would shoot a lot of stuff. And cameras used to always be there in the house. And he would encourage me to shoot, which was a great thing. I think the most interesting part was when he finally gave me a camera when I was in the 4th or the 5th standard. It was a small point and shoot. That gave me that little freedom. He sort of empowered me, I would say. Shot a lot with that little camera. But in the meanwhile, Jamshedpur as a small town had this place called a hobby center.
Okay.
So the hobby center was built when Telco completed 25 years. And it was meant to provide hobbies for the kids. Among them was aeromodeling, there was photography, there was woodworking, there was a bit of computers, art of course. But the photography had 6 enlargers. So for a kid who was about 10, 12 years to walk into a studio and print and that magic of that, image coming up was something that, even today when you look back, it was a great feeling. So that sort of was, I would say, the catalyst because, everybody would have a camera, right? But going and printing your own stuff was like the icing on the cake. And because Jamshedpur has a lot of Bengalis, there were a lot of Bengali senior photographers. There was Supriyo Bose, there were I forget the names of 2 brothers. Yeah, Probir Day and Subir Day. Now, these were guys who did wildlife and a bit of editorials in the magazines and stuff. They had like an awesome kit as a kid, to go and see all those Nikon F2s and the big lenses and stuff. So I think what my dad would do is take me to these guys' houses and say, hey, have a look at this, hold this lens. And I think that was, where it all started. And yeah, partly to my dad, partly to Jamshedpur. And in fact, my so-called guru, Supriyo Bose, stays now in Bombay and he's very proud of where one has reached.
How wonderful.
So yeah, it was a great journey. So yeah.
Can you think of any anecdote from back then where you realized that this is where I'm going to be in my future, because back then it was, Ronny, it was engineering karo, medical karo, and that was it, management karo. To get into photography professionally, was there a moment that happened?
Well, not so early in school days, I would think. So I remember there was this photography competition in the 9th standard, which I won. I came second. And they had the seniors and they had the juniors. It was a simple photo of a flower. And I'd used a close-up lens and I got that picture really nice. Yellow flower, green background. And a very proud moment going up there and, winning that second prize. I felt good about it. At that point of time, I didn't think it as a career. In fact, strangely, I wanted to be a forest officer. So that's a different story.
Nice.
Yeah. But I I think what happened during those years where all these friends of mine who were all nerds, so there was this Bengali guy, there's this South Indian guy who are my best buddies. Today, they're all photographers. Of course, they're not professional photographers. One guy does only birding. One guy does only landscape. And I, of course, have become a professional. So that grounding has still, has still held us instead. And we still talk a lot about photography. Later in college, I remember, I think around the second year, there was this little thing in some of the competition that won where they said, hey, this guy might do Pune proud. And that was because I was starting to shoot people by then. I was shooting my friends. I was doing these mini portfolios. But I think even then I was not too sure whether I wanted to be a photographer. But I was loving photography. So yeah, it was much later that when I came to Bombay that, then the clarity came in.
Okay. So what was your journey like?
Initially, it was a lot of fun shooting birds and sunsets. And I won't call it wildlife, but anything related to nature. As I came into Pune, did a lot of mini portfolios. Like I said, I would shoot friends in the college and stuff. And they liked it. It was not great stuff, but it was like a journey. I didn't understand much, but, I was shooting it. I was doing the whole work, as they say. When I came into Bombay, that's when the whole mold got set, if I have to use the term, because that's where I was very clear that, okay, now I want to be a photographer. And I happened to work with Atul Kasbekar. The beauty about working with him then, which was, I think, 92, 95, was he was shooting everything. He was shooting people, he was shooting cars, he was shooting ice cream. So we got to see a lot of varied work, assisted him on some great projects. And in those 3 years, it was it. I mean, that's the way to become a photographer, even today, I think.
Okay, to assist somebody.
Yeah. If you assist someone who's good and is doing good work, that's it. You don't really need too much of a knowledge of photography. I mean, you need a basic of photography in place, but you don't really need like a degree and stuff for that. That's my take.
But did you qualify professionally for photography?
Not really. That time there weren't many courses. I did an evening course in Ferguson College, which still exists. I think it's a 1-year evening course, which I did in the first year. But very basic. It's not really heavy stuff. Today there are a lot of courses. There's Symbiosis, I think there's one in Ooty. But I've seen students who come out of those colleges and sometimes I feel there is stuff lacking,
Okay.
I ask them 3 questions. The first question is, what is depth of field and how do you control it? Very simple question. I get to know how much the person knows by that one question. Second is I ask them, what is rule of thirds? And some people know it, yeah. And the third is a very complex but a actual simple question, if you're really interested in photography, is what is the angle of view of a normal lens? And most people stumble there. So, but the guys who know all those answers, then I say, okay, fine, this kid is interested.
Okay.
So that's my process of hiring assistants also.
So if anybody is looking to get hired as an assistant with Ronny, this is what you need to figure out.
Yeah.
These 3 questions. So coming to Bombay, moving to Bombay as a complete outsider to the world of professional photography. I think back then it was a little more forgiving too. And of course you worked with Atul. Breaking into starting your own work, getting work, deciding this is my forte. What was that process like? Because, very often you get slotted. This person does fashion, this person does food, this person does, something else. But did you want to do that, or were you clear that I'm going to do everything possible?
I think most photographers want to do, inverted commas, fashion photography. But that's what I feel that sort of pigeonholes you. I worked with Atul, who did everything. And today, I'll be very happy to say I can shoot bikes equally well. I can shoot interiors. I am a people's person, but I would say I'm more a portrait person. While I was doing my portfolio, Atul gave me a very simple piece of advice. He says, have 20 pieces of work in your portfolio, but have at least 5 what you'll call conceptual / non-people work, which is product, or it could be anything else. So we did some interesting. I shot a pair of boots, I remember, black and white, put them on a string and got a little bit of a blur. So they, even though they were not proper product shots, they were conceptually very strong shots. And strangely, some of them got me work. My first commercial shoot was a Pond's Dream Flower Dabba. So I mean, when I look at it that way, is that at least got the money in. So I think I'm happy to say I'm a commercial photographer, which does everything. I prefer shooting people, but yeah, I mean, if the work is challenging enough, and the guy trusts me, I can do it all. So,
who are your inspirations in photography?
Oh, they've been changing over the years. When I started out, it was Richard Avedon. Big fan of his. I think what I liked about his approach was he did a lot of studio work, and he would do a lot of single light studio work. He used a lot of reflectors, mold the light with one light. I still remember there was this one image that I would say was like the benchmark of my imagery also, wherein he shot this naked guy jumping across a gray background. And whenever I looked at that picture, I said, wow, man, what a great shot. Of course, he had shot with one of the best models at that point of time. And we didn't have models in India who were as good or, in terms of a body. But we got this guy who came in from, I think, Germany, called David. And David agreed to shoot the shot. And when I did it, I mean, it was like one of those moments where I'm like, oh, wow, I've sort of reached somewhere close to my, my guru, someone I look up to. Even today, after 20 odd years, that image, stands in my studio. It's a great shot. So yeah, Richard Avedon was who I looked up to. Today, there's Mario Testino. I've gone back to a guy called Irving Penn, who's also great.
Stuff.
He shoots people, he shoots products, he shoots portraits.
Portraits exquisite.
So at some level, it never stops. The journey never stops. You can keep looking up to people, yeah.
Absolutely. And what would you say, Ronny, is a Ronny Sequeira shot? Is there something trademark that anyone will look at a photograph and say, Ronny's click that?
Yes. So a lot of my art director friends who see my personal work know what is my style. Very black and white, very high contrast, and there will be a sexy element. So I still remember we were doing this calendar for Hindware, and the art director is a friend, so he called me and he said, hey man, there's only one person I thought about to do this calendar. That's you. The brief is very simple. It's a black and white calendar of gorgeous looking girls in a great bathroom. That's it. And then of course there are other products. He said, I leave it to you completely. So that is the amount of faith he had in me, because, it was not a small shoot. It was like a 60 or 70 lakh job over 3 days. And I still remember getting so involved in that shoot, right from, set design to choice of models. Even though there was a stylist, I sort of shadow styled the whole thing. And of course, the lighting on that day. So when you see that campaign, it's a good reflectance of what I do commercially. But if you see a lot of my personal work, it's very in the sort of, the vibration is the same. So I like black and whites, I like high contrast, and I like my pictures to be sexy.
Black and white, high contrast, and sexy pictures.
That's right.
Looking from the outside, we see the finished image that comes out in an ad or in a magazine. But shooting to a certain request, a certain script, there's a lot more behind the scenes. You have to, work with the art director, you have to work with the client's fussiness, and you have to let your own creativity come through. So what is your process like to balance all these elements?
So it depends on the job entirely. Some jobs are very simple. You don't really use your brain too much. You just go there, do nice clean lighting, get the expression, and that's about it. And then you have the complex ones where, like the art director says, it's completely your baby. Now, maybe 15 years back, it would scare me. But today it's like, okay, let's do this. And I feel most art directors who approach me know what level I work at. So they won't interfere too much with the process. They give me an outline and they say, okay, fine, this is what you can do. And then they let me take over. And I think that's the best way to go, because if they restrict me too much, then sometimes I'm okay saying, okay, I'm good with whatever you're saying. It's not an ego thing, but I feel that when you've hired a creative person and you've hired someone with a vision, you have explained to them what you want. Mostly if they're a senior person and they're intelligent enough, they know exactly what is the requirement, and let them do their thing. For example, we shot Herbalife about 2 months back. A lot of lighting references, a lot of mood references and stuff. And very coincidentally, at that point of time, I had got these gels from New York, lighting gels. And when I saw the references, they were very hardcore, like too much of color and stuff like that. But I put together like the 3 colors that I thought would work. I tested them in the studio. And then when we finally shot them on the shoot, the clients were super happy. But what am I trying to say is that, yes, they come with an idea. I do my little homework. And then on the shoot day, the results are there. So they are happy. But there are some times when, I'll just go with the flow and say, okay, I'll shoot this. I don't use too much of my brain. So it depends on the job. Yes.
Okay. That's interesting. Not use too much of your brain. But then, the work comes out. And like you just mentioned, you had those gels and you sort of use them on that very day itself. Do you feel that you need to keep updating yourself constantly on what's happening in the industry? Maybe train or retrain, even though you've been 2 decades in the business?
No, that's absolutely required. As a creative person, you're constantly, I'll use the word evolving, but it's also about being up to date. Yeah, I think sometimes in India, we do have a lack of stuff that's available, whether it's equipment, it's lighting. But of course, today, a lot of people travel to the US. And in fact, as of now, there are 3 of my assistants in the US. 2 of them are coming back. And there's a store called B&H. You get everything there. But every once in a while, if I want something specifically, I'll order it. They carry it down. So the gels is just an example. But there are sometimes light modifiers. There's something called a Vortex soft lighter. Now, this I've seen on shoots where there's an Annie Leibovitz or there's a Richard Avedon shooting with the same thing. And then I would keep saying, what is this? And then one day in one of the interviews, she talks about it. And I see the price and it's hardly anything. It's like $100. And I bought it. And over the years, I've had maybe a dozen. And I always use that light a lot. It's a great light. Now, what am I trying to say is that sometimes we lack in India. But if you're doing a little bit of, you're getting into that, zone that, okay, I want to figure out what this light is. You can always get it from abroad. In terms of software and stuff for that, yes, we are constantly updating our main software, which is Capture One. But the beauty of having assistants today is that sometimes they know a lot of this stuff. And then I tell them, okay, do you know Lightroom? And they say, yeah, we do. Okay, I want this area dark and I want this shadowed, and they do it. So that's a great thing. It's good to have young assistants around you. Yeah, always.
Always, everywhere. Gen Z sort of saves the world sometimes.
Totally.
Yeah. According to you, Ronny, what are the elements that must come together for a good photograph to happen?
I think we cannot escape lighting. It has to be good lighting. So lighting equates to mood. That's important. But I think what's most important is, at least in the portraits that I do, is to be able to get the moment or that look in the person's eye. If you don't get it, the lighting, the background, the clothing, everything can be fantastic, but the shot doesn't come there. So I'll give an example. We were called when the lockdown was just opening, or it had just opened, I think, 2021. There was the shoot with Saurav Ganguly, and we were to shoot him in Calcutta. And they were quite complex shots in terms of production. And we land up there. Normally, I meet the art director one day before. But he's a friend, so he says, no, I'll meet you in the morning. I said, okay, fine. So he comes to me literally half an hour before the shoot, shows me the layouts. But in the layouts, Saurav Ganguly is there in the shots. So I'm a little perplexed. I said, hey man, what's it? The shots are here. He said, no, we had shot it. This is a reshoot.
Oh.
I said, okay, and why? He said, look at the expressions. Now, these are wide shots. These are wide shots. And the shot was for a biscuit, I think. Biscuit and chai was the whole thing. But in all of them, his expressions were blank and they were not happening at all. And the client rejected it. But now here, suddenly the pressures come on to me.
To get those expressions.
To get the expression. So that was scary but challenging. And then I think I always rise up to challenges. So I asked my assistants, listen, figure out what music this guy likes. And we Googled and we couldn't figure out what Saurav likes. So I said, okay, he's approximately my age. Let's play Eagles, right? So we're playing Eagles. He comes in and we start shooting. And I still remember the very first shot, because I knew once I cracked the first shot in terms of the mood, the rest will just happen. And we were getting it. So he comes, he puts his hand on me and he's seeing the monitor and he's saying, hey man, the music is helping. And in my head, I'm saying, yeah, bloody well, it is helping. So yeah, I have music on sets a lot. It's my job to be able to extract that expression Because like I said, if that's not there, then what's the point,
Mm-hmm.
And that could be in a close-up shot also. I mean, like in a wide shot, if a client is saying, hey, I've rejected this campaign because his mood is not right, imagine what it'll be in like a super close-up shot.
Music is a big element for you.
Very important. I love my music.
That's interesting. And you spoke about working with Saurav. Now you've worked with, I think, almost all the celebrities by now. Most
Pretty
of
much,
them.
yeah.
And what are the challenges of working with them? Because you have your creative requirements. There is a brief to be shot to, and they have their moods. So how do these three
I think it
blend?
depends on a couple of things. One is if you work with them before, it always helps.
Okay.
So an example is the very first shoot that I was doing with Sachin was the scariest because for two reasons. One is it was not an easy shoot. It was a slightly technical shoot. But I knew what I was doing, so that was a good thing. The art director had immense faith in me. But the irony of the matter was, first half, my boss was shooting, and it was recording studio in Mehboob. And literally, he was walking out and I was walking in with my troupe for the second bit, right? Now, that was pressure on me because, my boss is shooting before that. But he was magnanimous and he's like, all the best and stuff. He had no clue what I'm shooting. Now, the shot was basically for ESPN, I remember. And we had to do this partial reveal of Sachin where his head is there against a black background and he's just rim lit, which means that you can make out his shape, but you can't make out who it is,
Details.
right? And the best part was that a few months before I'd shot something for my personal work. And this, the art director had seen and they said, listen, I want to do the same thing, right? So I knew exactly what I was doing. But the scary part is there's pressure on you. You're shooting with him for the first time. But I still remember we did the first Polaroid and Sachin said, can I keep the Polaroid?
Oh, wow.
So that was it, And when the hoardings came out, it was a big deal because, people saying, who shot this? Who shot this? Because it was very different, right? Because you're shooting Sachin in a silhouette. My boss knew it because he knew that was the shoot I was doing. And that was the first shoot I was doing with him. After that, Sachin became a friend. So, it's all about breaking the ice, doing a good shoot. Many years later, I shot Mahi for Sonata. And at that point of time, Dhoni was not that big. He came to my studio, I remember. He used to have long hair. And it was a very simple shoot. The art director had said, Ronny, you ideate. It was one single white sofa. And we had these 2-3 changes. And that's it. I just let loose in the studio. And we got some great pictures. Post that again, he became a friend. So it's a comfort level thing. Sometimes you'll have mood, yeah.
So a lot of photography is visual storytelling. So is that something you keep in mind when you're trying to click photographs to tell a story through the photograph?
Always, yeah. I mean, today with the iPhones, you get great images. And now how you can take the iPhone and do a great image also is storytelling. In fact, today I'm so much more comfortable with the iPhone because it's got a better latitude that sometimes I feel that, hey man, can I get more megapixels in this and shoot? And there are people shooting today on the iPhone, not big campaigns. So storytelling is, I think, inherent to whether you shoot on a phone or whether you shoot like with a big format camera. And what is the essence of the photos finally that has to come through? So if it's a portrait, you want the eyes to talk. If there's mood, so we cycle in the mornings nowadays. What are we trying to capture there is that little moment, So yeah, storytelling is always going to be there, whether you use an iPhone or whether you use a high-end camera. It is a part of photography, yes.
Yeah. Are you aware in a subtle way or in a subconscious way that sometimes I need to take creative risks in a photograph? Is that something that's behind at the back of your mind?
Yes. So when I say creative risks, it's something that, is pushing the envelope technically. So let's say you add a blur to an image by purposely shaking the camera. But I wouldn't do that on like big commercial jobs.
Huh.
Yeah. It'll be on mostly what I'm trying out. I shot these interesting portraits with Arzan Kambata in a studio where I said, let me do layers. So I had a mirror being held and I shot his reflection in the mirror. But while doing that, I sort of jiggled the camera. So when I say jiggle the camera sort of rotated in a clockwise, anti-clockwise way. So what happened with that is the external, the outer parts were slightly blurred and he was still okay because there was a flash on him. Now, it didn't all turn out really good, but it turned out interesting and he loved it and I loved it. Now, if tomorrow a client comes to me and says, listen, man, I like that. Can we do that? I've already done the homework.
Mhm.
So yes, it is important to, play around with technique. Like a couple of weeks back, I just used natural window light to shoot some products. I've never done that in a while. And I enjoyed the process. So tomorrow, art director says, "Hey, I like that work and I want to do something like that." I'm totally open to it, yes.
Now we speak about digital, and now AI is coming in a big way. For photographers, for any creative person, it seems like an opportunity and a threat. How do you view it?
Interesting. About 5 days back, this friend of mine who's also in advertising comes up with this little thing and he says, I got this app where I'm doing backgrounds for, right now it's only products, but I don't mind for people also. So do you have any things that's coming up? Very strangely, 2 weeks back, I had got a call for Bata. So Bata had these influencers to shoot, about 5-6 of them, one day in a studio. But we had a lot of these backgrounds which they already had purchased. But there were 2 backgrounds which they wanted us to either shoot or get it done with 3D/AI. And it was these, I think, Diwali or something like that. And I still remember speaking to my 3D guy and he said, "Hey, we can do this, but..." When I spoke to this friend of mine and I showed him what I wanted to do, of course, the shoot didn't happen with us. It went with someone else. He said, "Yeah, this is doable." Now, I think that's where, at least for backgrounds, because that's where sometimes, a lot of the times where you want to shoot the model separately, insert the background, cost cutting and, stuff like that. So yeah, in this situation, the AI would have helped me. Is it a threat? Maybe in some situations. I'm not really bothered about that. But where it can enhance my photography is, like I said, in the backgrounds and stuff, yes.
Lovely. Now, very often, like, I know you're an avid biker, and I know that, we all as creative people need to get away from the process somehow to refuel. So how does biking help you? Or do you have some other ways to refuel, to get back to the creative zone?
Yeah, so I do a lot of stuff other than photography.
Tell me all.
So there's obviously motorcycling, which has been there for like a long time. Recently, cycling. And I think during the lockdown, we had so much of time on hand that we started fishing also. So we would go out to the rocks at Bandstand and we would fish. Of course, that doesn't happen anymore, but cycling today is a big thing.
Okay.
Cycling is also the fitness bit. 3 days a week, we do NCPA. So that feel-good hormones obviously kicking in. Then there's the new buddies that you're making. Very interesting characters. There's always people inspiring you. So there's a 58-year-old guy who rides with us and he's so fit that, we look up to him and say, "Man, Rajiv, I want to be you when, and I'm 58. Yes, there is a release there. There is fun there. There are photos. But yeah, I mean, whether it's biking, cycling, or any hobby, I think it's important to have something on the side to, hit the refresh button once in a while.
Lovely. If someone wants to get into photography as a profession now, what would you tell them to do in terms of, building, not just building their portfolio, just learning the business?
So I won't go to the business as yet. I would say start with getting the basics in place. If you can do a course, that's great. It sets a foundation.
Any course you would recommend?
There are quite a few. There's the one in Ooty, which is Light and Life. There is one in Goa, I think. I forget the name. Then there are 2 in Pune, which is Symbiosis and BVP. I think any course that, covers all the basics is good.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that if you do a course, you've learned it all. You can have a great encyclopedia. Like I recommend the Kodak book of photography for most people who are starting out. You buy that book and go from start to finish. You've got everything in there, So I'll give you an example. This friend of mine from Australia suddenly said, "Hey, I want to do a bit of wedding photography." And she must be 2-3 years junior to me. What do? I said, first get a good camera, and then buy this book. And she bought the book and now we are in touch. She's on WhatsApp and stuff. So the first thing that I feel that you need to do is get your basics in place. Then the ritual is still the same. Work with a good photographer, work with someone who's doing interesting work. And that's it, that sort of sets you on course. Having a photographer or a mentor in your life obviously helps you build a portfolio. There's a girl who right now is working with me last 2 years. And next thing I think she's traveling now to London. She's got her base very well in place. So when she goes and she studies photography or whatever she wants to do related to photography, it's just going to be even better. And what I feel is that after that, once you've got your, you've got your assistantship in place, once you've done a bit of your basics, then it's about setting out in the market with your portfolio. As simple as that.
Okay. Sounds very easy, but there's a lot of grind and hard work to it, definitely.
There is, but I feel it's if you work with a photographer after your basics are in place, I mean, there is a hit and miss possibility, but I have multitude of assistants working at different levels. So, it all depends on where you're going to slot yourself, what has been your background. Some guys have money problems. When you start out as a photographer, you have to have the basics in place. You have to have a camera with a couple of lenses. Some people don't have that. That's scary.
Oh.
But yeah, it is quite simple.
It is quite simple.
Yeah.
So there's heart for everyone who's listening in. And Ronny, of all the work you've done, anything that stays back with you and you're really, really very proud of?
There's quite a few. But some of the editorials that I did with L'Officiel way back, I think it was 2004 and 5. Editorials always has a lot of creative people coming together. There'll be the stylist, there'll be the editor of the magazine sometime who starts off with this is the thought process. And because they worked with you a few times, they give you that leeway. So I remember this shoot distinctly because I was experimenting with different types of lighting. I used what they call a baby light, and I used multiple baby lights, I think about 4 or 5 of them. And we went back to, in the 50s and 60s, the way people used to light up. And a lot of cross shadows, which means that, when you see the picture, there are like about 4 or 5 shadows in the background. But that's what it got interesting, because the cross shadows and the lighting was like unlike anything people had seen before. And it turned out really well. It turned out so good that I remember Ambience, the agency, was trying to shoot something for West Side. And I don't know why they didn't call me, but they attempted with another photographer who is a friend. And I know later on he tried to explain to me what he did, but it didn't come anywhere close to that. So it was a great tribute to me that, maybe they couldn't afford me. I don't know what the reason, they didn't call me. But that was a great shoot. Those sort of shoots, stay on forever. And yeah, I like to do more of those.
What's coming up, Ronny?
We might be doing something with Dhoni in October, fingers crossed. There's something else. So we do a lot of celeb work. I'm not caught up with celeb work. Celeb work is a little different to handle because you have to handle their egos sometimes and stuff. But among the interesting work that I do once in a while, I think Herbalife is one which I'm looking forward to. There's another one that's coming up. And some of my personal work also is good fun, yeah.
Yeah? Great. Looking forward to what's coming from you, Ronny. Thanks so much for taking time for this.
Thank you so much, Kiran. Thank you so much.
And with that, it's a wrap on this episode of Chasing Creativity. We were chatting with Ronny Sequeira. Do listen in to the episodes on BingePod, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your audio content. See you next week. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Chasing Creativity. I wanted to say thank you to Amazon Music once again for partnering with me on this episode of this podcast.